Welcome to another edition of Microsoft Azure AI Fundamentals AI-900. We are on the Azure AI Engineer Learning path, and this is Lil, your NVIDIA AI practitioner. We'll continue on this journey. We are on Module 1, which is Microsoft AI Fundamentals, and we have completed section 1 and 2 of Module 1, which are Fundamentals of AI concepts as well as Fundamentals of Machine Learning, and we'll now be moving on to Fundamentals of Azure AI Services. So with that, let's get started.
Fundamentals of Azure AI Services. In this module, you learn the fundamentals of how Azure AI services can be used to build applications. Learning objectives. Understand applications Azure AI services can be used to build. Understand how to access Azure AI services in the Azure portal. Understand how to use Azure AI services keys and endpoint for authentication. Create and use an Azure AI services resource in a Content Safety Studio setting. Introduction. Artificial intelligence, AI, is changing our world, and there's hardly an industry that hasn't been affected. From better healthcare to online safety, AI is helping us to tackle some of society's biggest issues. Azure AI services are a portfolio of AI capabilities that unlock automation for workloads in language, vision, intelligent search, content generation, and much more. They are straightforward to implement and don't require specialist AI knowledge. Organizations are using Azure AI services in innovative ways, such as within robots to provide lifelike companionship to older people by expressing happiness, concern, and even laughter. In other use cases, scientists are using AI to protect endangered species by identifying hard-to-find animals in images. This was previously time-consuming and error-prone work, which the Azure AI Vision service can complete quickly and with a high degree of accuracy, freeing scientists to do other work. In this module you will learn what Azure AI services are, and how you can use them in your own applications. Next unit, AI services on the Azure platform. AI services on the Azure platform. Azure AI services are AI capabilities that can be built into web or mobile applications, in a way that's straightforward to implement. These AI services include image recognition, natural language processing, speech, AI-powered search, and more. There are over a dozen different services that can be used separately or together to add AI power to applications. Let's take a look at some examples of what can be done with Azure AI services. The Azure AI Content Safety Service can be used to detect harmful content within text or images, including violent or hateful content, and report on its severity. The Azure AI Language Service can be used to summarize text, classify information, or extract key phrases. The Azure AI Speech Service provides powerful speech-to-text and text-to-speech capabilities, allowing speech to be accurately transcribed into text, or text-to-natural-sounding voice audio. Azure AI services are based on 3 principles that dramatically improve speed to market. Pre-built and ready to use. Access through APIs. Available on Azure. Azure AI services are pre-built and ready to use. AI has been prohibitive for all but the largest technology companies because of several factors, including the large amounts of data required to train models, the massive amount of computing power needed, and the budget to hire specialist programmers. Azure AI services make AI accessible to businesses of all sizes by using pre-trained machine learning models to deliver AI as a service. Azure AI services use high-performance Azure computing to deploy advanced AI models as resources, making decades of research available to developers of all skill levels. Azure AI services are a portfolio of services, with capabilities suitable for use cases across sectors and industries. For example, in education, Immersive Reader is being used to support students by adapting to their requirements. Learners can have varying needs, such as wanting to read more slowly, get words or text translated into another language, or see pictures to aid their understanding. Immersive Reader helps students with different needs learn at their own pace, and in their own way. While Azure AI services can be used without any modification, some AI services can be customized to better fit specific requirements. Customization capabilities in Azure AI Vision, Azure AI Speech, and Azure OpenAI all allow you to add data to existing models. For example, in sport, athletes and coaches are customizing Azure AI Vision to improve performance and reduce injury. One application allows surfers to upload a video and receive AI-generated insights and analysis. These insights can then be used by coaches, medics, judges, and event broadcasters. Azure AI services are accessed through APIs. Azure AI services are designed to be used in different development environments, with minimal coding. Developers can access AI services through REST APIs, client libraries, or integrate them with tools such as Logic Apps and Power Automate. APIs are application programming interfaces that define the information that is required for one component to use the services of the other. APIs enable software components to communicate, so one side can be updated without stopping the other from working. Find out more about development options for Azure AI services here. Azure AI services are available on Azure. AI services are cloud-based and accessed through Azure Resource. This means that they're managed in the same way as other Azure services, such as Platform as a Service, PaaS, Infrastructure as a Service, IaaS, or a managed database service. The Azure Platform and Resource Manager provide a consistent framework for all your Azure services, from creating or deleting resources, to availability and billing. Note: in some situations, AI has the potential to be used in ways that might compromise an individual's privacy or rights. Microsoft has 6 responsible AI principles to help ensure AI services are ethical and fair. Because of this, certain Azure AI services are restricted to ensure they're used responsibly. Next unit: create Azure AI service resources. Continue. Create Azure AI service resources. 100x. Azure AI services are cloud-based, and like all Azure services, you need to create a resource to use them. There are 2 types of AI service resources: multi-service or single-service. Your development requirements and how you want costs to be billed determine the types of resources you need. Multi-service resource: a resource created in the Azure portal that provides access to multiple Azure AI services with a single key and endpoint. Use the resource Azure AI services when you need several AI services or are exploring AI capabilities. When you use an Azure AI services resource, all your AI services are built together. Single service resources: a resource created in the Azure portal that provides access to a single Azure AI service, such as speech, vision, language, etc. Each Azure AI service has a unique key and endpoint. These resources might be used when you only require one AI service or want to see cost information separately. You can create a resource several ways, such as in the Azure portal. How to use the Azure portal to create an Azure AI services resource. To create an Azure AI services resource, sign into the Azure portal with contributor access and select Create a Resource. To create a multi-services resource, search for Azure AI services in the marketplace. To create a single service resource, search for the specific Azure AI service such as face, language, or content safety, and so on. Most AI services have a free price tier to allow you to explore their capabilities. After clicking Create for the resource you require, you will be prompted to complete details of your subscription, the resource group to contain the resource, the region, a unique name, and the price tier. Next unit: use Azure AI services. Continue. Use Azure AI services. Once you create an Azure AI service resource, you can build applications using the REST API, software development kits, SDKs, or Visual Studio interfaces. Using Service Studio interfaces. Studio interfaces provide a friendly user interface to explore Azure AI services. There are different studios for different Azure AI services, such as Vision Studio, Language Studio, Speech Studio, and the Content Safety Studio. You can test out Azure AI services using the samples provided, or experiment with your own content. A studio-based approach allows you to explore, demo, and evaluate Azure AI services regardless of your experience with AI or coding. Associate the AI service resource. Before you can use an AI service resource, you must associate it with the studio you want to use on the settings page. Select the resource, and then select Use Resource. You are then ready to explore the Azure AI service within the studio. As an example, let's look at the Azure AI Content Safety Service, which identifies harmful text or images. To explore what the Content Safety Service does, let's use the Content Safety Studio. First, create either a multi-service Azure AI Services resource, or a single-service Content Safety resource. Then, on the Content Safety Studio settings page, select the resource, and select Use Resource. The AI service you created is now associated with the Content Safety Studio, and ready to be used. Note: when developers incorporate an AI service into their applications, they often use a SDK or the REST API. Next unit, understand authentication for Azure AI services. You've now learned how to create an AI service resource and associate it with an Azure AI Studio. But how do you ensure that only those authorized have access to your AI service? This is done through authentication, the process of verifying that the user or service is who they say they are, and that they are authorized to use the service. Most Azure AI services are accessed through a RESTful API, although there are other ways. The API defines what information is passed between two software components, the Azure AI service and whatever is using it. Having a clearly defined interface is important, because if the AI service is updated, your application must continue to work correctly. Part of what an API does is to handle authentication. Whenever a request is made to use an AI services resource, that request must be authenticated. For example, your subscription and AI service resource is verified to ensure you have sufficient permissions to access it. This authentication process uses an endpoint and a resource key. The endpoint describes how to reach the AI service resource instance that you want to use, in a similar way to the way a URL identifies a website. When you view the endpoint for your resource, it will look something like https://myiservices29.cognitiveservices.azure.com. The resource key protects the privacy of your resource. To ensure this is always secure, the key can be changed periodically. You can view the endpoint and key in the Azure portal under Resource Management and Keys and Endpoint. When you write code to access the AI service, the keys and endpoint must be included in the authentication header. The authentication header sends an authorization key to the service to confirm that the application can use the resource. Learn more about different authentication requests to Azure AI services here. When you use a Studio interface with Azure AI services, your credentials are authenticated when you sign in, and a similar process is happening in the background. Next unit, exercise, explore Azure AI services. In this exercise, use the Content Safety Studio to explore one of many Azure AI services. Note: if you don't already have one, you can sign up for an Azure subscription, which includes free credits for the first 30 days. Launch the exercise and follow the instructions. Explore Azure AI Services. Azure AI Services. Check out the keys and endpoint. These capabilities you tested can be programmed into all sorts of applications. The keys and endpoint used for application development can be found both in the Content Safety Studio and the Azure portal. In the Content Safety Studio, navigate back to the Settings page, with the Resources tab selected. Look for the resource you used. Scroll across to see the endpoint and key for your resource. In the Azure portal, you will see that these are the same endpoint and different keys for your resource. To check it out, head to the Azure portal. Search for Content Safety on the top search bar. Find your resource and click on it. On the left-hand menu, look under Resource Management for keys and endpoints. Select Keys and Endpoints to view the endpoint and keys for your resource. After you have finished, you can delete the Content Safety resource from the Azure portal. Next unit, Knowledge Check. Knowledge Check. 200 XP. 1. An application requires 3 separate AI services. To see the cost for each separately, what type of resources should be created? A multi-service resource that includes all the AI services. A single service resource. An application requires 3 separate AI services. To see the cost for each separately, what type of resources should be created? A multi-service resource that includes all the AI services. A single service resource for each AI service. It's not possible to see costs for individual AI services. 2. After logging into one of the Azure Studios, what is one task to complete to begin using the studio? Input a key and endpoint into the studio. Customize the API request. Associate a resource with the studio. RCE with the studio. Associate a resource with the studio. 3. What is an Azure AI Services resource? A bundle of several AI services in one resource. An AI service to recognize faces. A single service resource for Azure AI Search. A bundle of several AI services in one resource. An AI service to recognize faces. A single service resource for Azure AI Search. Next unit, Summary. Continue. Summary. Azure AI Services are easy-to-use AI capabilities made available as resources on the Azure platform. Azure AI Service capabilities include language, speech, vision, decision, search, and Azure OpenAI. In this module, we've used several different terms relating to AI services. Here's a recap. API, Application Programming Interfaces, APIs, enable software components to communicate, so one side can be updated without stopping the other from working. Artificial Intelligence, AI, computer programs that respond in ways that are normally associated with human reasoning, learning, and thought. Azure AI Services, a portfolio of AI services that can be incorporated into applications quickly and easily without specialist knowledge. Azure AI Services is also the name for the multi-service resource created in the Azure portal that provides access to several different Azure AI services with a single key and endpoint. Endpoint, the location of a resource, such as an Azure AI service. Key, a private string that is used to authenticate a request. Machine learning, the ability for computer programs to learn from large amounts of data, in a process known as training. Multi-service resource, the AI service resource created in the Azure portal that provides access to a bundle of AI services. Single service resource, a resource created in the Azure portal that provides access to a single Azure AI service, such as speech, vision, language, etc. Each Azure AI service has a unique key and endpoint. RESTful API, a scalable web application programming interface used to access Azure AI services. You can find out more about Azure AI services in the service documentation. All units complete.
And with this, we've completed section 3 of module 1, and module 1 is complete. So artificial intelligence workloads and ML module, which is module 1, is now complete with the completion of fundamentals of Azure AI services. We will now move on to module 2, computer vision, and its 3 modules in the next section. Looking forward to seeing you in the next one. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them in the comments section. Excited to have you on board. Cheers. Bye.